This is the second video about the basics of generator. I decided to break them up into smaller videos so that they don't get too boring. And so here we're going to talk about everything that didn't make it into the first one. So first we're going to talk about disabling nodes. As you can see here, I have a number node with a value of 1, 2, 3, and here I'm multiplying it by 2, and I'm getting the result 2, 4, 6. Now if I select it and press Ctrl-Shift-E, it gets disabled, and the value here is 1, 2, 3, just like here. The reason I picked Ctrl-Shift-E is that, well, I'm on Windows, so it's going to be Command-Shift-E on a Mac. But if you have an object in Figma, to show and hide it is Ctrl-Shift-H. And so I thought that would be a nice pattern to continue because it's a similar function. If I then, you can also do it from the context menu. Re-enable it, and then you get the value here. You can do the same thing with text. So here the text is my first name, and I'm replacing first with last, and the result is my last name. But if I come here and I disable it, then you have my first name. This doesn't work for all nodes because it doesn't make sense for all nodes. So for example, if I have 2 number nodes, and let's say I'm going to do like 1,000, and I'm going to bring in an interpolate node and something to see the result. So I plug both of these in. There you go. This can't be disabled. The item is not in the context menu either, because it really doesn't make sense to disable an interpolate node because there's not like one input or one-to-one relationship of input to output. So some things you can disable, some things you can't. The next thing is resizing nodes. This is really short. Some nodes can be resized. If you want to have the value of 2 hanging around somewhere, you don't want to have it, in a giant node, so you can resize it. Same thing with the text node. Some text is going to be short, but some text is going to be really huge. For example, if you're working with like CSV data and stuff. So you can resize your text nodes. All right. A pattern that came up when I was developing Generator is typically you'll see in a menu something like this. You have a menu, like a menu title, and then it has a submenu with actual nodes that you can create. But it became necessary to do this, which is not a pattern I've seen in other software. Maybe it exists, I've not seen it. But it's very useful, and it came up automatically. So, for example, you might not always want to have your window this big, or you might not ever want to have your window this big. Sometimes you want to see your content, and then your window is going to be off to the side or whatever. Well, if you go to the list menu, this almost fills up the whole window now. And it's just, long menus become difficult to navigate. So I thought that I'm going to try not to stack items as much as I can. I'm just going to hide them. So for example, you can have a number node, but you can also go over here and grab some other nodes like a constant. They serve a similar functionality, except here you can pick the number and here you pick a predefined number. It's basically the same, right? Just kind of different. So it makes sense for it to be a sub-menu item. Same thing here. There's a simple math node. I'm going to talk about number nodes in more detail in a different video, but this is a good example. And then there is not a complex, but like a multi-entry math node. This lets you do quick operations like +1 or ×2 or whatever. And this lets you multiply a bunch of stuff at once. This will take many parameters or many inputs. It also seemed to make sense to put them in the same menu. Another example is the color node. So you can go and quickly grab a color node, and then, but then if you want to make it red, for example, just like to rough something in, then you have to go in and, change all the parameters. But you might just want to be able to go in and grab like a quick red color, or a quick, yellow color or something. It makes sense to hide them here. So just be aware of this pattern. Some of the nodes might be hiding a submenu of a clickable item. Now let's talk about inserting nodes. Let's say you have a node chain where you have a number, and then you have another number, whatever, and then you want to put a node in the middle. Okay, so the default thing to do is to go grab your whatever simple math node, connect this to here, and then reconnect this like this, and so now you can do stuff to your value. Or another way to do it is to select the first node, and then when you're creating the math node, just hold Control, and it gets automatically inserted into your chain. Another thing you can do, which sometimes is very useful, is to create a separate branch. So if you have this one selected, and then you hold Control Alt or Command Option on a Mac, it connects it to the selected node, but in a different branch. Removing nodes works the same way. You hold Control and you press Delete, or you can remove them from the menu. If you just press Delete, it'll delete the connections as well. The next thing we're going to talk about is selecting trees. In certain situations, when you have a lot of, I'm going to load this composite gradients example from the tutorials. When you have a lot of nodes, it might be difficult to move them because a lot of the wires kind of overlap a lot of the nodes and it just becomes a mess. I mean, it's up to you to organize your nodes, but sometimes you might want to just grab, for example, this node and then everything to the left of it and then move that. So the way you do that is you right click a node and then you say select and then, for example, select left. And then everything that's to the left of it is automatically selected. Or in this case, for example, I want to grab this one and say select right. And then it automatically selects everything that's to the right of this node in the tree. In complex graphs, you might also want to be able to see which node is connected exactly to which other node without seeing without seeing all of the other stuff. For this, you have the highlight mode. When you click this, everything kind of goes dim. And then when you hover over any node, you will see just that node highlighted with all of the connections that it has. And this makes it a lot simpler to understand what's going on for debugging purposes. Right. When you're close up, it's easy to modify values. You can just, click on it, type in some, get something else. You can drag a value with your mouse, and it's easy. There we go. But if you zoom out, it becomes very hard. So you can do a lot of stuff by accident. To prevent this, what I did is I lock the ability to adjust values when the nodes are too small. So if you click anywhere in the node, all you can do is just drag it. First of all, this makes it easy to manipulate your nodes from far away. And the second thing is it prevents you from accidentally changing values to something you don't want. You know that this mode is on because the zoom value here is now surrounded by this sort of white node, as you can see. And then as you zoom in, it disappears, and that means that you can now again manipulate values directly. By default, it sits at 35%, but you can change this value if you go over to the preferences and go to zoom level for values, and then you can change it. Like if you have a giant screen and you can manipulate things that are much smaller, you can like put 15%, and then as you keep zooming out, you see that you can still change the values until you get to 15% and below. So I'm going to go put this back to 35% because I found that to be the most average useful value. All right, all the keyboard shortcuts that are available are written down in the menus. The ones that aren't, you can find in Help and Subscription keyboard shortcuts. This works exactly like in Figma. It's just there are fewer shortcuts because there's not as much stuff going on. So this is for the pro subscribers. Like I was talking about in the previous video, when you create objects with generator, first of all, you can tell that it's a generator object because you see the generator logo here in the front. I'm going to add a color. And actually, I'm just going to create a bunch of these. A bunch being 2. And I'll plug the color into both of them. So now I have 2 rectangles with a color. So if I close the plugin, the objects disappear. If I reopen the plugin, the objects appear. There will be times when you want to keep your nodes, your objects on the canvas, even when you close the plugin. So if you don't do this, then you have to Control C and then go into a different Figma page and then Control V there. And then you can use the objects without any issue, because generator is not fighting for them. So if you're a pro subscriber, you can use the render node. And what the render node does is it allows you to keep your objects on the page when you close the plugin. So when you plug this in, you close the plugin, the objects stay. When you reopen the plugin, they are updated. So this is useful for something like if you want to keep the current date automatically generated for the page. You can just always have it on the page, and then when you reopen generator, it'll update the current date, as an example. This has a preserve parameter, so if you turn this off and close the plugin, they disappear. If you want to keep them if you want to make a copy of these objects so that they're no longer controlled by generator, you click the icon. And so what happens here is you see that the generator logo has disappeared. And now when you close the plugin, they stay. But when you reopen the plugin, 2 new rectangles appear, because these 2 old ones are now not related to generator at all. They're now your objects. They belong to Figma. The last thing is, so generator is still pretty new, right? And so there will be, hopefully not, but there might be bugs. Certain bugs will prevent you from loading your document, or from loading your graph, I mean. And to recover your graph, you need to go into the debug mode. If you go into preferences, you have to click on show debug menu. You'll have to accept there's like a warning dialog. But then once that's there, you have this debug menu, which allows you to do a bunch of stuff that, this is really for me. This is really for me to get rid of bugs and to see what's going on under the hood, because there's a lot that's going on under the hood. But this last option over here, restart in debug mode. So let me just create some, like a rectangle and a color. This is my standard example, apparently. And then I'm going to go into the debug menu and restart in debug mode. What this does is it shows you just the data version of your graph. So you have your 2 nodes and you have the connection. That's it. You can double click them to see the JSON that I save to save the node in the document. Same thing for the connection. And that's pretty much all you can do besides deleting them. So you can right click on this node and you can say remove path from ID, delete connections from, delete connections to, delete all connections, or delete nodes. So for example, if I delete this node, it also deletes the connection that was connected to it. And then when you go to restart in normal mode, you just have the 1 node. And then it says cannot connect. Rect not found. So hopefully you'll never have to use the debug menu, but in case you do, in case something's not loading, this gives you some ability to fix your situation and get your graph to work in some state, right? It might not have all the connections that you made because there's like a bug in a node or something like that, but it'll let you at least get some work back immediately. And then you can contact me and I'll try to help you fix it. That's it for this video. In the next video, we're going to talk about numbers and math.